Okay, welcome back to the lecture, and in the third part I'm just going to focus down on what all of this means for your assignment. So this is the first part of the assignment briefing. I want you to write an impact study in which you demonstrate how your teaching has enabled one learner to make progress. This can be in relation to their conceptual understanding or in relation to developing a particular skill, but it's got to be history-specific learning rather than generic ways to describe learning. And I want you to relate your account to at least 2 examples of the learner's work, one chosen as a starting point and the other as the end point. If you can choose evidence that shows us snapshots of students' progress through the whole scheme of work, that's fine. You should submit a description of each piece of work in relation to the history learning intentions and an account of the progression that's evident between them. So I want the work, or at least your account of the work, and I want your account of how you know the work demonstrates progress. So how is one piece better than another? And you should also provide a brief account of what you did as a teacher to secure that improvement. So reflecting on the brush and say example from the second part of the lecture, we need to think about intentions and your criteria for making judgments. So you'll have noticed when we looked at the example in part 2 of the lecture that their learning intentions were framed as historical empathy and understanding of epistemology about history as an academic endeavour. And then they developed those in the context of American civil rights movement in the 1960s, but their learning intentions were not framed as an enhanced understanding of American civil rights movement. They were framed as an improved understanding of historical empathy and of historical epistemology. So this is important to think about when you come to be very clear about your learning intentions, that we will have learning intentions which are articulated in relation to the big ideas that drive history pedagogy, and we can distinguish between those and the context in which they're being developed. And in this case, the context is the topic, the subject. So we need to then make some judgments. You need to use the broader history literature, especially from the long lectures that we started the course with, in order to identify the concepts and skills that you're going to identify in your learning intentions. And then you need to move on and think about what kind of judgments you can make. Now, Brush and Say, in the example we looked at, already had some idea of what engagement would look like, what empathy would look like, and what epistemological changes would look like. But they didn't get these from the back of their mind. In their paper, they explicitly reference these to the historical education literature. So the models they identify from the literature rather than just identifying from the student's work from scratch. So you need to go back and use some of that literature to develop ideas about what it is you're looking for around those learning intentions. And then Brush and Say were clear about how they were going to collect evidence to inform those judgments. And you'll need to do the same thing. So you need to think about evidence that will naturally arise in your lessons. For example, students will be doing work in their book, they might be doing work in class, they might be preparing a speech or preparing a presentation. So all of this is just evidence that will be generated through your teaching. You might need to develop some new activities in order to create or capture particular bits of evidence. For example, if they're working in a group, you might need to devise some short reflective task for the students to write down what they did in the group and how they feel their learning moved on as a result of doing that, because ordinarily we wouldn't capture group work in that way. And then finally, you might need to think about additional recording or note-taking that you're going to do to capture evidence that's based on talk or interaction. For example, if a student presents in a formal way to the rest of the class, or if they participate in a debate, how are you going to capture that? You might make notes, you might use a digital recorder, you might use a video, but somehow you've got to capture some of that evidence which is lost otherwise. So of course you can only go so far in the classroom in collecting all of that evidence yourself, and it may be that you'll benefit, and this is really useful for action researchers in the classroom. You may benefit by inviting in another adult, perhaps someone who needs to observe your class anyway at some point in this term. Get them in, give them a briefing, tell them the group or the student you want to observe, ask them to collect notes on particular aspects of their engagement or involvement or particular contributions they make, and that can be much more useful than a teacher who's busy running the class trying to capture some notes about the processes that are unfolding in their own classroom. So this is why we need to give some thought to the kinds of evidence we would need to have in order to make the judgments, in order to inform our subsequent evaluations of how effective we've been in the classroom. And so we need to plan. Action research is useful because it helps us to think about how we're going to be more rigorous about the normal everyday process of planning, teaching, and reflection and evaluation. So how we're going to make judgments about the success of our teaching requires us to lay down a proper rigorous plan about what we're going to do, and therefore in order to prepare for this assignment you just need to revisit some of those principles of planning, being very clear about what you intend to achieve, being very clear about what success would look like, being very clear about the evidence you'll need to reach a judgment, and finally being clear about how you're going to analyse that evidence in order to justify your judgment. And what I want to see in the assignment is some evidence of you working through those different stages. So good luck with that, and looking forward to seeing your work when it comes in, and good luck in securing improvements in some specific way in the learning.